Is the world heading for a new world order? And how should Sri Lanka strategize in order to make sure that our future is secure in the world ahead of us? Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh Elyathambi. With me this evening is Dr. Kulani Wijayabahu, who is a senior lecturer in international relations at the Arts Faculty of the University of Colombo. Good evening and welcome, Dr. Kulani.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Good to have you on the show. Dr. Kulani, a few days ago, US President Donald Trump said something quite remarkable. He said that India and Russia appear to be lost to the deepest, darkest China. Very dramatic words indeed. Of course, Mr. Trump is always full of drama, but this seemed rather decisive, and it struck me that it is perhaps prophetic that we are in fact headed for a new world order. Now, for decades, or perhaps for nearly a century, the United States has dominated the world with its economic power and its military power. And of course, it had so many strong alliances, especially with Europe, but also with other countries around the world. But now there seem to be some cracks appearing. And what does this mean? So, are we really headed for a new world order?
Very timely question, I would say, because these sort of X messages and very interesting headlines emerged in international media, especially after the Shanghai Cooperation Summit happened August 31st to September 1 in China. Yes, I think we are heading to a new world order, and with these incidents, we'll get to know the features of this new world order. Like, if we are talking about this new world order, perhaps we need to unpack what it is and why it is and how it is happening in the world. So, focusing more on the existing world order, or the not what is happening right at the moment, but before that, we all know the fact that after the collapse of Soviet Russia, there was a world order. We call that as a unipolar world order, which was led by the United States of America. In that particular world order, US dominates the economy, US dominates the military, US dominates the culture and society in the world. Then what has happened to those powers at the moment in this current world order? Are these powers are declined? Does that mean that US is no longer an economic superpower in the world? Does that mean that US doesn't have any military superpower in the world? We have to question these things. So, statistically speaking, still the US has the largest economy in the world, but at the same time we need to have power doesn't have any meaning unless otherwise you influence through it. Like, even if my mobile phone is a powerful element, but unless otherwise I use it, I make it to make some influence on someone else, to alter the behavior of someone else, that power doesn't mean anything. In very simple words, it is useless. So, we have to ask that question, the US, at the same time its military capability. We know the fact that yes, even if China is rising with numbers, like statistically, by owning the largest navy in the world and the army in the world, but once again I think undoubtedly US has that strategizing military power in their hands. So, that is what everybody says. When it comes to the operation, when it comes to the battleground, US is using it very strategically. So, in that sense, I think US still dominating the entire military map, defense map in the world. But when it comes to culture and society, that is where we can exactly see how the multipolarity is emerging in the world. Like, we know, like we all love the Hollywood films and the popcorns, McDonald's, KFC. Yes, there are a lot of brands and cultural brands and pop culture, different sort of things. But at the same time, if you go and ask Gen Z young person, what is your favorite actor? Probably they might name someone from South Korea. The Korean industry is also rising. The Indian Bollywood culture is also rising and expanding throughout the world. So with these things, the US dominance is not that much certain in the cultural and especially in the cultural sphere. So at the same time, when we look at the polarity, multipolarity, especially the institutions in the world, that also gives us a different signal how this world is being fragmented with the emergence of new institutions. The good example is Shanghai Cooperation Summit, very recent one, apart from BRICS, and also now we have a New Development Bank, which was formed by BRICS nations, and on the other hand, China led multiple initiatives like Asia Infrastructure and Investment Bank, and also different sort of institutions. So with these things, we can see how power is shifting, especially that institutional power is shifting from Western dominance, US dominance, towards the Asia-centric power bloc. That is pretty interesting because like during the colonial period, the power and influence is very much direct. But in post-colonial era, with these institutions, they use these institutions, of course, to cooperate on the agenda. But when it comes to praxis, they use these institutions to influence. A different influence that can be a norm, that they set some universal norm and ask us, see, your norm and your practice can be very local, but it is not universal, hence you have to change it. So we as the members of these institutions, somehow we have to align with their agendas and be a part of their institutional what we call
their practices and
exactly
their ethos.
Yes. So now this current bloc, the emerging bloc, is using the same institutional power to lead the power of the world to a different direction. From, like, in other words, I would say they introduce alternatives to countries like us, the countries like very small, vulnerable and weak and fed up with Western dominance, their conditions, their selectivities. Look, now it's like a menu card in front of us. Now you have a lot of food to choose. Now it's up to us to see what we need to select for what, to achieve what. So that institutional power is the other thing I think this multipolarity signals us. At the same time, it's the institutional power and we have to realize that in a perfect way. And on the other hand, Nirosh, I think we have to be a little bit smart to unpack the actors in this new block. Like these actors. Yes. So the actors in the sense, not only the state actors, but also the non-state actors. Like it can be Russia, it can be China, it can be India, it can be Iran, North Korea. And why? What is the common intention that they have? So at this time, honestly, I think, in my opinion, they gathered together to signal against the US dominance, against the US pressure on them, against what Trump is doing at the moment through American taxation, like why the US, the way that American disrupts the supply chain and all. So to that purpose, they gathered together, but that doesn't mean this is the perfect alliance. They still have some fractions that they need to address, that they need to like there are a lot of mistrust between these actors. So we have to understand that unless they address those misalignments, mistrusts, there won't be a sustainable long-term integration between these actors to create an alternative camp. understanding that is very much important as a third party, as a small state, especially for Sri Lankans, because if we camp with, align with such a fragmented alliance for our long-term national goal, that will bring reverse effects on us. I think we have went through enough, and for this time we have to be very smart in understanding the nature of relationship that this alternative camp is building at the moment. So yeah, so in that sense, I think yeah, we are
So
heading.
we need to be cautious about where we are jumping in.
Precisely.
Right. To give our viewers a little bit of background about Dr. Kulani, she holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the University of Colombo and a PhD from the University of Otago in New Zealand. And she is, of course, a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Arts of the University of Colombo. So, Dr. Kulani, you mentioned some very interesting aspects about power and the projection of power. And now we generally think of power as economic power and military power. And in those aspects, of course, the US has dominated, the US military, the US Navy, its Air Force, and the high-tech weaponry that it possesses were basically unmatched for, I guess, about 80 years. But now we see the rise of China in the military sphere. And then economically, we see the rise of China and also India, because India is growing at a stupendous rate, over 7% average growth rate in their GDP. So they seem to be climbing up the ranks of the largest economies in the world. So they are projected, I think, to become the second largest or the third largest in about 10 years' time. So we're seeing this shift in those aspects, military and economic. But you mentioned some interesting additional aspects. For example, culture, which is not, we don't normally think that culture is a decisive factor, but now that you mentioned it, I do realize that yes, it's, for decades we were dominated by Hollywood, by the American musical scene, but now we see, of course, Bollywood and Korea and several other countries. We see their culture coming up as well. And their culture is spreading around the world. It's not, when you think of Bollywood, it's not sort of isolated to India or South Asia. It's now everywhere. So how important is it to look at these aspects of culture, whether it's music, whether it's movies, whether it's sports, for example. The US for decades dominated sports, Olympics and so on. But now you have China is very much up there as well. So how important is it when you look at influence?
Yes, I think we are reaching to an interesting point in this discussion. I start with the concept of power. Theoretically, power is an ability, and theoretically, we divide power into two. One is the hard power, the other one is the soft power. So, in hard power, once again, we have two elements. One is the economy, the other one is the defense. And we use both powers to, influence others and make some impact. And it's a hard way of getting the control of the others. But when it comes to soft power, it is not that you use direct influence on others, but rather get the attraction from the rest in favor of you. So when it comes to Hollywood, Bollywood, it can be a Korean music, cinema, it can be a popsicle, it can be ice cream cone, it can be KFC or whatever. We attract to those things. At the same time, it changes our perception about these countries as well. We not just embrace the brand, we embrace the perception of that country as well. With that, they create a very positive image perception in our minds, so telling that okay, us is very close to us, China is very close to us, Korea is very close to us, and it's promoting the attractiveness of their culture. So with that, what we just give up, we give up our roots and embrace something new, telling that now this is the new globalization, this is the new trend, this is the way that we need to dress, this is what we need to watch, this is what we need to consume. It even can be food. Just think Italian food diplomacy. It's just a piece of pizza, but we consume it. But with that, we consume what? This is the most nutritious food in the world. We consume that perception as well. So it is no longer another fast food in the world. We consume that perception. So in my opinion, nothing is apolitical in the world. Everything is political. Even it's a brand, it can be anything. It can be a fashion, it can be poem, it can be anything in the cultural sphere. It is not, it is political, and it makes an impact on someone else's life. At the end, someone else's national agenda, national interest, and with that they create market. They strategize it in that way, they sell it and they earn out of it. So this is how the global supply chain has been created, to sell and to get profit out of it. So in that sense, I think culture is a very interesting aspect, and Sri Lanka is also has a very rich culture, but we don't strategize it. We don't see the economic value of it. I don't say the fact that, oh no, we have to commercialize our culture, but we have to promote our culture as a commercial element to get some profit out of it, and to especially to create a positive image about Sri Lanka, because culture is a very sensitive and very much easy to reach the public, the international community, because it is not that state to state level relationship, that top to top level relationship. Even through those public relations, we can get very much closer to the international community. I think that is what very powerful countries are doing at the moment. I once remember the United States Navy, they performed a Sinhala song at Sri Lankan rural school. So when they performed that Sinhala song, it was surprised to see that how these white American military people know our language and sing our own song. So that creates some sort of bridge between that superpower Americans with our locals. It changed our perception about the US. Like USA is a friend, it's a close ally, so we don't want to suspect it. So likewise, culture has a power, it can influence, it can create good perceptions as well as bad perception, but we have to be smart enough to design in which way that we need to use our culture.
So that's very interesting, because when you were talking about culture, I was thinking of Singapore, and the fact that in Singapore they actually invented a mascot, the merlion, a cross between a mermaid and a lion, and that was never part of their ancient culture. It's something that they artificially introduced a few decades ago, and they promoted it very heavily, but that became the symbol of Singaporean culture. Now here in Sri Lanka, we have, I mean, we speak about our 2,500 years of history, but we haven't quite gathered together and understood what that really means. I mean, you spoke of food diplomacy. Well, if the Italians have pizza as their food diplomacy, Sri Lankan food is far richer, far more diverse, but we haven't really projected that, have we? And are we missing out here? Have we not understood how rich our culture is?
That is one aspect of it, Niresh, I would say, because when it comes to our culture, our curiosity in discovering it, rediscovering it is very low. For instance, we've been a maritime state from how long? Right? We've been an agricultural state how long? And we had Anuradhapura era. So once the Anuradhapura era was collapsed, we created another era, another kingdom, which sustained a long period. But we never did a quite, insightful research on how that reconciliation part happened in Sri Lanka. Because we've been a war-torn country very recently due to the civil war, yet we didn't manage to do a research to understand what sort of lessons that we can learn from the past, from Anuradhapura to Polonnaru, how that power shift occurred in Sri Lanka and sustain Anuradhapura kingdom for a longer period, what sort of elements that we added there. So that is where our hidden wisdom is, according to my opinion, because we have to understand that there is a wisdom. Surely there is a wisdom, but we don't have that much of curiosity to look for it, to learn about it, to research on it. What is our maritime wisdom? How did we manage and sustain our maritime knowledge for a longer period? How did we in our history books we talk about all the Sorau and Bisokotu and sort of things, but we never want to do a deeper level research on our engineering tactics. We never teach our students, our fellow generations about those engineering stuff, about our irrigation system, about our agricultural wisdom. I think that is because of we think the fact that okay, Sri Lanka is like there is a world out of Sri Lanka. We don't want to bring that world into Sri Lanka, localize our own things and spread among our population, and enhance our credibility and confidence about our own things, our native things, authentic things. So that is where we are lacking. That is the one aspect.
But Dr. Kulani, just to interrupt, if we don't properly appreciate our own culture and all the many elements you spoke of, our maritime culture, of our agricultural, irrigational, cuisine, so many things. If we don't understand and appreciate it, we can't project it to the world, can we? And that's what if you take India, India has done that very successfully. I mean, whether it's Indian restaurants or Bollywood or whatever the Indian style of dress, they have projected it to the world very successfully, whereas we simply haven't done that very much. We tend to think that we are just a small country and we can't influence the rest of the world.
Yes, I agree with you completely because especially when it comes to Sri Lanka, I feel the fact that Sri Lankans always has that small state mindset.
But we're not a small state.
That's the thing, Neeraj. Like even if let's say we are small, small doesn't mean that we are fragile, that we are weak. We can strategize ourselves. We can do things different way. Just think about Singapore. You just spoke about Singapore with a very classic example, very symbolic example.
No, that's a very small country.
Very small country, even compared to Sri Lanka, and they don't have any natural resources as well. They only have a good transit hub, the location, and they strategize it. Now the world cannot think about the shipping lanes, the transactions without Singapore. So they have gained their significance through the location. And we also teach our students that, I don't know, even when I was a student, I was told that Sri Lanka is located at the strategic position. But when did we get something out of it? We do have a lot of ports around our country. As far as I know, 7 ports, and natural ports as well. And when we read Mahavans, all the historical archives, we very proudly emphasize the significance of these ports. And being an island nation separated by India, it's a strategic position. And there are a lot of sea lanes of communications beneath Sri Lanka. But when did we strategize it? When did we tell a bigger story, smart story, using our smallness? Like telling the world that smallness is not a weakness. It is not a vulnerability as long as we strategize it. But we never tell that. So I think that happens with our culture as well.
But did we actually go backwards during the last, let's take from independence, when the world was actually divided into two, basically. You had the Western Bloc headed by the US and UK and France and so on. And then you had the Soviet bloc, which included the Warsaw Pact countries and many other socialist countries around the world. And then there was the third bloc, which became the non-aligned movement. But within all that, we in Sri Lanka, we tended to think of ourselves as very small in this global game. But were we actually small? Because when you look back at history, contemporary history, let's say 50, 60 years ago, you realize that many of our national leaders were actually quite famous on the world stage. If you take, for example, Mrs. Bandaranaike, she was world famous, and she visited so many countries. She was invited to so many events and countries around the world, and people listened when she spoke. She was quite a celebrity. But we in Sri Lanka don't seem to have connected with that. We don't understand that we were important even recently.
My answer to that question is this. Like when it comes to Sri Lanka, like let's take India and China as good example for the. I start with that example, then I'll relate that to the Sri Lankan context. Now we all say that China is rising. Our neighbor India is rising. How? We have to ask that question. How are they rising? They focus more on their historical archives. Surprisingly, they read almost all of their historical archives to see the fact that what sort of historic knowledge that they have in each and every field. And they want to revive that knowledge, revive that wisdom, and relate that into the present context. The good example is Sun Tzu's Art of War, which was written by Sun Tzu, a Chinese military expert. Currently, China's new strategy, that Belt Road Initiative, China's Dream, you name anything, that has a clear connection with that historic archive. What, like, do we have that? Have we discovered anything like that? What sort of priority that we give to our history? Like even when it comes to educational reforms, we have a discussion whether history is a school subject or not. Do we need to add, like, what's the importance of history? Do we really want to learn that subject? Like, we are asking lot of different questions when it comes to history. But India and China both are reviving their image, reviving their economies based on their history, historical wisdom. So in that sense, Niresh, I feel the fact that Sri Lanka is lacking with that intention. That is where we are small. We never think that we have that big mindset. Our history is big, and we were once a very prosperous and glorious country, so we can do bigger things. We never think in that way.
We don't project that. We don't behave like that.
Exactly. So when it comes to blue economy concept, we think that we are a part of it, but we never thought the fact that, oh my goodness, in our Sri Lankan history, we practice that. It is in our wisdom. This is not something new to us. when it comes to environmental governance, it is not, UNEP or UNFCCC tasked to tell us this is how you have to govern your environment. Our ancestors, our forefathers, they manage, they govern the environment in that sustainable way. That knowledge is in us. But rather than we are taking that knowledge into the world is now asking us to, okay, this is the way you have to govern your environment. This is what you have to do. This should be your blueprint. This is how you manage your economy. So we are incorporating world concepts into us rather than rediscovering our own knowledge and wisdom and tell the world, look, this is what we have, this is the wealth of knowledge that we have, and we have practiced that for a longer period, and this is a really good case study. And in that sense, Sri Lanka is not small. Sri Lanka is strategizing its knowledge, because that is what I think we have at our hands at the moment, because we don't have, a very powerful economy to influence the world. We don't have a skyrocketing defense budgets to secure our territorial integrity, but we do have knowledge. We do have very good demographic factors as well, Niresh. And with migration, I know now many might criticize me, but with the recent economic crisis, migration is the one of the implications that we spoke a lot. But I can show you a positive side of migration. Now we have a diasporic community, especially in developed countries, and not just unskilled people migrated for this time. A lot of skilled migration happened due to this economic crisis. So why can't we have a national diasporic policy to get their contribution to create a positive image about Sri Lanka? Why can't we use them to promote our culture in those developed countries? Because we know the fact that a lot of migrants, skilled migrants, went to Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, United Kingdom. So we can definitely use them as a bridge to create a very positive.
But now all these factors you're talking about, Dr. Kulani, it strikes me that India has done this very successfully. Indians migrated out of India and to countries like the UK and the US. There are millions of Indians living in the US, and they project Indian strength, Indian power. And when you think of the manner in which the Indian government deals with the rest of the world, it's always from a position of strength. Whether they are dealing with the United States or China or whoever, who are militarily stronger, the Indian government still behaves with that feeling of strength. They project it, and that is because they know who they are, isn't it?
Of course, undoubtedly, because it's very interesting to see the evolution of Indian foreign policy, Niresh. Like in post-independence India, they adopted non-alignment policy. So once the Cold War is over, they want to re-strategize their non-alignment, because non-alignment is no longer valid in a post-Cold War period. So then they had different viewpoints. Initially they thought of, okay, now it's the non-alignment 2.0 version of foreign policy, but at the same time they thought, okay, now the world doesn't have two camps, it's a unipolar system, but still they could be able to see the future implications of the changes happening in the world. So with that, they first came up with Look East policy in 1992, as far as I remember. Then under Modi's arrival into the power, he make it more proactive, replacing Look East into Act East. So with that, they wanted to create new alliances with the new partners. And with that, they, rather than naming its foreign policy as non-alignment, they used different word, that is strategic autonomy. So that is what they are trying their best to maintain in their foreign policy. Even Jayashankar, the foreign minister of India, time to time, he emphasizes the fact that whatever India does, it does under different pressures, but yet they want to preserve the strategic autonomy of India. What does it mean by strategic autonomy? Like when it's come to strategy, it definitely has long-term target. When it's come to autonomy, that means that it has its own power to make decisions. So strategic autonomy in decision making process. No one is going to influence in your decisions. So how you can make decision for yourself in a such independent world, interdependent world? India is doing that. China is doing that for themselves. Even you take Russia, amid lot of sanctions and isolations and humiliation, still they make strategic autonomous decision for themselves. How can you do that? That you can do when you have compatible domestic strength. So India is doing right at the moment, as we discussed before, by expanding and promoting their diasporic community throughout the world, by promoting their own Indian goods and services throughout the world. Because when it comes to IT, we get the names of lot of Indians, like even if it's Google or any other tech giant company, lot of CEOs are Indian origin. And when it comes to even politics, Niresh, at the moment, with American and Western scholars, we see some Indian scholars as well. For instance, Amitav Acharya, he spoke a lot about the global south and the Asian politics and so kind of things. And even cuisines, even culture, even politics, even militarily. So India is doing by strengthening its own domestic capabilities. So when you have that domestic capability, at least one niche area, you can fearlessly bargain at the negotiation table. That is what India is doing at the moment. That is what China is doing at the moment. They do have that leverage in international dealings, even if asymmetry is an enduring factor in international relations. We can't overcome asymmetries in the world, but we have to realize the fact that asymmetry is not an anomaly. It's a normal thing. Just imagine that our relationship with our kids, that relationship is asymmetrical by nature, but that doesn't mean asymmetrical relationship are abnormal. We manage it. We don't ever try to overcome the asymmetry and create symmetrical relationship. So like we feel the fact that when it comes to smallness, it is something negative. When it comes to asymmetry, it is something negative. No, even within these negative sort of words, we have to find the way out. We have to find the way how we can strategize it. Just take an example, Russia. We know since 2014 up to now, different countries put different sanctions on Russia, mainly because of the Ukraine war. And also there are lot of allegations on Russia about war crimes and so kind of things. But they still survive. They are the 11th largest economy in the world. They are still in the first rankings when it comes to economy and defense. How could that happen? They strategize sanctions even. They strategize the way that they can find, like those sanctions and restrictions couldn't destroy Russia, but it could rebuild Russia. They find the way out. I think that is what Sri Lanka as a small state should realize, rather than telling the world that, okay, we have a very vulnerable situation and we are in a weaker position. No.
But diplomacy is about projecting strength, isn't it? It's not all, going to the world and saying, well, we're poor, help us out. We just, we're coming out of bankruptcy. The world doesn't really want to hear that sad story. Not too often. We can't keep harping on that. Now, one point you made about strategic autonomy, it struck me that India, the Indian stance on Donald Trump's tariffs is the perfect example, because India has its strategic autonomy. It has decided where it's going to trade, with whom it's going to trade, and it's doing so in the best interests of India. So it's something very calculated. So in the meantime, Donald Trump says, well, India should not buy oil from Russia, and he's imposed a 50% tariff on India, saying if you stop trading with Russia, I'll bring it down to 25%. But the Indian government is looking at the strategic autonomy of it and saying, no, this is our strategy. You can't force us to do this and that and change around. But of course, there are negative connotations. The Indian economy could be affected by the 50% tariff, but they're calculating, and they've taken all that into consideration, haven't they?
Of course, because the one thing that we usually forget is when it comes to India-Russia relationship, it's historic and cordial. They didn't have any friction in their long-standing relationship. So this is what we can see in the current developments as well. So for instance, due to the sanctions, Russia wanted to find an alternative route to sell their oil and natural gas to their conventional market, which is Europe. To do that, they use India as a mediator, as a third party. And on the other hand, India also has some concerns with Russia's close alignment with China and China's close alignment with Pakistan. So, to balance that presence, Russia's presence, China's presence in the Indian Ocean, Russia is the only country that they can leverage that relationship in favor of their national interest. So, in doing so, definitely India has to face US taxation. It's a different sort of reaction with the close alliance of India with Russia. So, taking all these things together, what we have to realize is, since Cold War politics up to now, India never been that much close to the US with compared to Russia, because even during the Cold War period, Russia has provided a lot of assistance, economic assistance, military assistance to India despite their non-alignment policy. So, with that Russian assistance only, they could be able to battle with Pakistan, battle with China, and they could be able to manage their position in the Indian Ocean. So, even today, India realized the fact that the Indo-Pacific strategy of US and the Quad strategy, those are US initiatives to make sure that they can counter any expansion of either China's influence or Russia's influence in the Indian Ocean. India knows that. Knowing that only India is getting closer to Russia and playing a role as a strategic balancer in the Asian continent. I think it's a strategic move. I don't see it as a stupid move. It's very strategic because at the same time they know the fact that even if there are travel restrictions or migration restrictions for Indians in the US, that will negatively impact on their industries, not only to the Indian industries, but at the same time, as you correctly said, if this taxation, 50% taxation will remain a year, that will definitely impact on, as far as I can remember, 0.5% on India's GDP. So that has an impact. But I think India will strategize it with China and Russia. But at the same time, we have to understand the fact that the unity between these three countries, Russia, India and China, is not a perfect unity. They do
Right.
have lot of fractions, especially we know that China and Pakistan has very cordial relationship and India doesn't like it at all, and that relationship is continuing at the to antagonize India to some extent. So we have to understand these fractions at the same time. That is why I am telling it's not a perfect trio, but it's an alternative unity against US dominance, US pressure on the global supply chain at this moment.
Right. And my final question, because we are almost out of time, Dr. Kulani, is now Sri Lanka's foreign policy for decades it was set by our politicians, unfortunately, because our political establishment had so much power within our country. But now we have seen that changing, and we see the rise of intellectuals within our society. Their voices are being heard. The politico-military establishment is now giving way to a more modern society, we certainly hope. Now, in this context, how should our foreign policy objectives and strategies and our interests be decided? Because so far, for decades, it was a question of, well, the president and the prime minister and the foreign minister will decide this is what we're going to do. But that's not how a country decides its foreign policy. How should we go about this? Who should be involved?
Yeah, I can propose you two major things in relation to our foreign policy. One is to find ourselves, to find and refine our external behavior. One thing we should need to do is to realize our power capital. What is our power capital? Like, as you correctly mentioned about Mrs. Bandaranaike, we were very proactive, we were very vocal on international relations, and once we proposed Indian Ocean as the peaceful zone to the entire world and demanded major two powers don't involve, don't bring, don't militarize our Indian Ocean. This is a peaceful zone. And even former Foreign Minister Lakshman Kadiragama, his role was immense when it comes to cooperation, and also likewise we have to find our power capital. What is our power capital? Definitely it is not our economy, definitely it is not our defense. Then what? We have to find that a niche area where we can promote ourselves and narrate a very positive story about ourselves, where we can get the credibility of the international community. Currently we don't have that credibility, unfortunately, Niresh. When you go to abroad, that corruption labels and the social resistance, you know.
And we still talk about the war.
Yes.
So we need to.
A lot of negativities are there. So we have to find that positive narration about ourselves. That is one thing. Secondly, we have to understand that Sri Lanka is no longer a small state. We have a lot of resources, abundant of resources, and our most prominent resources are human capital. So how can we strategize it? We can create a knowledge hub here. We can be the pioneer in this rediscovering global south knowledge, because global south is rising at the moment. India and China are helping us to do that, even African continent. So in that project, we can be the center pillar. We can host a lot of seminars and conferences and a lot of things. And to do that, we need to find the local intellectual coordination. As you very correctly said, we are thinking the fact that foreign policy is a elite driven thing. We, you can't do anything to formulate it, to redefine it, to revisit it. That is a utter lie, Niresh. Foreign policy is not just a elite driven thing, it's a people oriented thing, because that is the policy that we use to manage our external behavior, determine our relations with the world. Hence, we have to be part of it. So, having people oriented foreign policy by defining our power capital with discovering our global south knowledge, we can strategize Sri Lanka's foreign policy, where we can narrate a very positive story about ourselves to the world.
And I'm afraid we are out of time. It's been quite an engrossing conversation. My thanks to Dr. Kulani Wijayabahu, Senior Lecturer in International Relations of the Faculty of Arts of the University of Colombo. Thank you for being with us this evening.
My pleasure.
And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.